everyone. Welcome back to Teachings of the Ascended Masters on Fallen Angels, Nephilim, and UFOs. And I'm Joseph Macchio.
And I'm Stephen Macchio.
And we're going to pick up where we left off about the two planets, Maldek and Hedron. We've already mentioned that the planet Maldek was exploded, but these two planets have a relationship to one another. So we're going to start with the story of the planet Hedron. And remember, this is revelation from the Ascended Masters to the messengers concerning the history of the solar system. So there was once a planet close to the sun, very close, called Hedron. And on this planet, the souls of Hedron were to outpicture the magnificent flame of divine love under the direct influence of Helios and Vesta, the rulers of the solar system. Now remember, all of this is not taking place on the dense physical plane. The planet that was close to the sun, Hedron, is on a different dimension, higher than the dense physical that we know. These evolutions, these people on Hedron basked in the sun. They rejoiced in God's love. But what happened? After a time of this childlike innocence, slowly but surely, because of lack of devotion to the true self, it turned to selfishness and what is called the pleasure cult. And so we get the word hedonist come from the planet Hedron. These selfish consciousness of those evolving on the planet, unfortunately, eventually resulted in their self-annihilation. They therefore destroyed that planet, and there is an asteroid belt between the sun and the next planet, and that was where the planet Hedron existed. So remember about Maldek, those who were counted worthy. Now, when a planet explodes, bodies are floating around the astral plane. And the karmic board decides that 2/3 of the evolutions of Hedron should go to, and were worthy of, if you want to use that word, the second death and the final judgment. A percentage of 1/3 was permitted to reincarnate on another planet. They reincarnated on the planet Maldek, which is now the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. At the time they reincarnated on Maldek, Maldek was a very pure virgin planet. Mm-hmm. It was, but with the coming of the Hedrons, slowly but surely, the planet Maldek was also perverted into a pleasure cult. Now let's go back to the Hedrons. On Hedron, the people of Hedron had a tremendous experience in science and in war. They were able to create weapons greater than most modern nuclear weapons, inventions greater than our current forms of transportation on air, sea, and land. And unfortunately, they did bring about a nuclear holocaust because there were two factions that could not get along, and they destroyed themselves by nuclear war. Again, with Maldek, as with Hedron, 2/3 went to the second death, and 1/3 was salvageable. Those who were salvageable reincarnated on planet Earth, where everyone eventually winds up. You notice that?
Yeah, they do. They kind of like this place.
So they did go through the judgment. 1/3 who were, let's say, humanitarians, philanthropists, scientists, they resisted war and in harmony. And those are the ones that were permitted to reincarnate on Earth. So thus the planet Earth, this planet, has the remnants of the Hedrons, or the pleasure cult. Now these are the people that only live for pleasure and nothing else. And tremendous advances. they also were permitted or allowed to create babies in test tubes. They created all forms of life, controlling genes, chromosomes, and also waging war, nuclear and biological.
So you notice that their MO is always the same.
Exactly.
Anytime something happens and an evolution goes wrong,
Yeah,
or makes wrong choices,
yeah,
or the energy veil that they create around themselves gets so great to where they always fall into these same pattern. See, so once you know their MO, then you know what's going to come up. And I wouldn't be surprised that people who were very fearful of the coming of nuclear power here, nuclear weapons on this
yes,
planet,
yes,
retain a soul memory of what could happen if things go awry. You know, things can get so bad that you can destroy a planet. I don't think we're there at all technologically,
no,
but there's still always a memory,
yes,
you know, and it seems to be a pattern that when an evolution descends into matter form known as the physical dimension, because people might be asking, you know, why do they're salvageable souls, like you said, 1/3, why do they come to Earth? Well, you see, when you make your karma in the physical dimension, in matter form,
yes,
you must go to the same place to work it out. You cannot be sent to the mental dimension of a planet. You cannot be sent to the etheric.
An etheric
you have
planet.
to, if you made it in the physical, you have to work it out in the physical.
yes, that's right.
And so these are very specific laws, karmic laws that you can't escape. I mean, you may have karma in more than one dimension, but if you brought it down to the physical, which they did, because you see the physical remains of these planets, they physically exploded the planet apart.
Yes.
You have to now, so here you are as on the karmic board as an ascended master trying to figure out.
Back on the comic board again.
Oh yeah, well you're made out for this stuff. You're on, and you have to decide
Yeah.
where in this solar system. You can't necessarily take them to another solar system because those evolutions are here on the planet that you have karma with. So the only way you can work this out is it's almost like the mercy of God deciding that let's give these people a chance, let them embody on Earth.
Yes.
It's in the physical dimension. They have a lot of issues there also. And the Hedrons and the Maldakians are also there, who they have karma with. And you can see this very difficult scenario, almost like a play.
Yes, it's out
playing out in these
Yeah.
very long, drawn-out cycles that go on for hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
years.
Two groups that cannot get along, that hate one another, all goes back
Yeah.
to Maldak.
Yes.
And there's an interesting question. Incidentally, I'm reading from The Paths of Light and Darkness by Mark and Elizabeth Prophet. And this is a very good book if you want to go deep into the story of the fall and so forth, and the fallen ones with even more detail than we have given in the show. So at one point, concerning the fall of Hedron, it was asked, if you're living a wonderful life, if you're living a life of beauty, as the Hedrons did, why would then they desire less than this beautiful life that they were living? Well, this is a very slow process. If you don't keep up devotion to the real self, some kind of devotion to the divine spark, because that's the way of evolution, it's by self-effort. All evolution, from a master up into a cosmic god to a Buddha, is a result of self-effort and the assistance of those above us, the great gurus, who help us and teach us. But in the final analysis, you have to do it yourself. So if you don't nourish the living flame of power, wisdom, and love in the heart, it will go down, and you don't necessarily know what degree you've fallen. So they had tremendous love and gratitude to start out with. But we also know that there were other evolutions in various other systems that enjoyed life in lower spheres purposely. So the people of Hedron began to want to desire life in lower, denser spheres. Why? In the lower spheres, or the lower domain, they could achieve a notoriety and a human kind of godhood not subject to the hierarchical chain of command.
That sounds familiar.
Okay? We will do our own thing in these spheres. Now we don't have to listen to our gurus. We don't have to obey the gurus. Of course, evolution stops. They would achieve independence and the fulfillment of a desire for a pleasure that would slowly begin with the titillation of the outer senses, instead of the stimulus of the inner sensitivities of the soul. So gradations of vibration are subtle, and the one least aware of his own fluctuations is the individual himself.
You know, it's almost no
Isn't it
different.
amazing,
It's
though?
amazing because when you were reading that, it's not that different from the child when they reach the certain notoriable teen years where they want to leave mom and dad and go out and enjoy and be independent and experiment with the things that are in the world, because mom and dad don't live, they're not part of this generation, and there's new things now, and I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that. And you can see a similarity between an evolution and what parents have experienced with their own children.
Yes, it's very.
And in some cases they go way off, but does the parents say, oh, forget them, whatever happened, I'm not going to be involved in their lives anymore? There's always the mercy of the parent that tries to woo back the teen by saying, well, you know, but a lot of times they don't listen. They have to do it for themselves. It's very similar to what you're talking about here. You know, even though they know better, they did know better.
They did know better.
They decided, but I need to be independent. And this is one of the, the dangers of the energy veil just thickens around you, and you cannot see or remember what it was once like.
Because it's slow and subtle.
Very, very slow.
And you think you're at a certain level of attainment, but you're no longer there.
Yeah, and then
it's very dangerous.
When they come to a planet like Earth that has all kinds of, like we explained, soulless ones, there's also other issues that happen where you don't know that the person is soulless, and there's intermarriages.
Yes.
And you get into that whole dilemma that brings down the individual even further. And so it's a very precarious
situation.
Yeah, very precarious. Now, were you going to continue with that?
I'm not going to continue with this, but I would like to read and mention from our book, The Soulless One, which is a series of great pearls of wisdom by the Master Akazi, the teacher of beloved Saint Germain, also holding the office of Great Divine Director in the spiritual hierarchy. And he has a chapter in here. We've seen Maldek, we've seen Hedron, that we're in this solar system. But back in 1965, the Great Divine Director suddenly came up with this. Long ago, from a certain systems of worlds, came bands who descended to Earth. The hordes of shadow who are invited here by mankind, for mankind thought by the power of good example to elevate the consciousness of the laggard bands. So I want to pause here and point out that this is from a certain systems of worlds, not in the solar system. We have the motive now. We can teach them. That even happened after this. It happened when, the laggards from Maldek and Hedron came. And their laggard means they're lagging behind in spiritual development. They're highly materialistic, and they have absolutely, in generally speaking, no desire for the ascension.
Yet they're very advanced technologically.
Technologically, absolutely brilliant, astonishing, and amazing. So, Great Divine Director, the Master Akazi, is now saying, now it is not so well known that these laggards were accompanied by some who were not invited. Uh-oh.
Here we go again.
Some of these brought knowledge to mankind and to the earth, and some of this knowledge was degenerative and destructive. In addition, they also brought with them strange creatures of their own creation, seemingly intelligent beings not created by God, however, but by advanced scientists on other systems of worlds.
So
Truth
basically,
is stranger than fiction.
well, yeah,
Remember that.
and Earth is an open house.
Yeah, apparently.
It's like a continuous open house to
And I think
anyone wants to come here. Hi, we're here, and they're invited by a mankind or a kind of man.
Well, who knows who invited them?
Well, that's
I mean, we
right.
don't know. I mean,
Right.
was it the root races? We don't really know. He just
No.
is mankind. And
No, but I think it has something to do with the soulless ones, because by this time they're very advanced, and they don't have a problem with inviting other evolutions to help them. Maybe they need higher scientific technologically. They want
Yeah.
other technologies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's talked about today, where the belief that the Greys and their UFOs, we need them because of their technology, and that they're going to save us, and that
Right.
their technology will undo all the bad things that mankind on Earth have done, which is the furthest thing from the truth. It's absolutely ridiculous to think that those creatures
Yeah.
with the big black eyes and the ridiculous long arms are going to help us in any way, shape, or form. But to get back to the soulless ones, I think I'm going to read a little bit from here, because this is from the same book that you read
Yeah,
from,
Paths
the
of Light and
Paths of
Darkness.
Light and
Yeah.
Paths of Light and Darkness, and it has to do with what you're saying in the soulless one.
Okay.
And so we'll talk about intermarriage and how these things could happen. Why would a mankind of Earth invite the evolutions from other systems of worlds?
Yeah.
And so it says that these robot creations that are already here on Earth were carefully adapted to their physical environment. They were endowed with a certain mechanical brilliance in science, technology, and business administration. Isn't that amazing?
This is pretty amazing.
Where these programs come from, where they simulate the God man.
Yes.
Now it continues and says, in physical structure, these robots, or mechanized man, were designed to intimidate mere mortals,
Yeah.
slightly taller and larger in bone structure than the average child of God. These mechanizations have a rather dead mechanical beauty, a glassy-eyed look, that has become a vogue in certain circles. So the term beautiful people points to the desire of their creators to endow the flesh with a beauty and a glamour all of its own, instead of making the physical body transparent for the beauty and virtue of God to shine through.
That's fascinating.
So you see here that the original understanding of the matrix of the physical body
Yeah.
was to be slightly transparent, and that what shone forth was the divine spark of the heart, the seven centers of the body,
Yeah.
the auric field emanating from the individual, the development of, the mind would glow with the yellow, and you would see the beauty of God first and not pay so much attention to the physicality.
Yeah.
But you can clearly see here that when you're concentrating on making the physical body glamorous, this is what happens. I have one other quick thing to read here.
Mhm.
It does say that it is very difficult to differentiate between a mechanized man and the creations of God.
Yes.
The chief difference is discernible only with the inner eye, with the use of the third eye chakra, as most people know of. Now, lastly, when I was talking about the intermarriage, which causes another problem,
Yeah.
it says here, intermarriage between the children of light and the children of darkness has brought about an adulteration of the divine fires with man, which basically means a watering down.
That's
slowly
right.
watering
That's right.
down
Yeah, watering down.
of the divine fires within man,
Yeah.
a weakening of the high integrity and natural morality of the sons of God, and a looseness in the codes of society that had enabled the powers of darkness to obtain a foothold of great magnitude in world affairs. So they had a foothold of great magnitude in world affairs because of this.
And remember, they're continuing.
Right. And then
What?
lastly, it says, it was to this end that mechanized man was created in the first place. For without the infiltration of the Luciferian creating mechanized man into society, the children of God would have naturally ascended into a higher consciousness. So they planned these things out way for thousands and tens of thousands of years into the future.
Yeah.
And it's you start to realize the diabolical but continuous MO. They do the same thing on every planet. And once you understand that, then you start using the tools that we were shown to the audience in the previous episode.
And you also view history, world events, past and current history in the light of this tremendous knowledge that we've been given, and now are no longer in ignorance, but see clearly what is going on. And again, what's stopping things from getting worse is this magnificent science of the spoken word.
Right.
And the direct invocation of the light.
Now, do you have more on the history of Hedron and Maldek, or is that coming to a conclusion there?
Yeah, I think that's coming to the conclusion. But just to mention that we already know that Earth is again a crossroads.
Right.
Because eventually, you see, in this solar system, Earth was the only planet that had a physical dimension of this level. All the other planets were not on the physical dimension. They were either taken over or their evolutions went up, their evolutions went up to a higher dimension. Either David Chonic or one level of the etheric plane. This also happened on Venus. So this is the last stand. In other words, this is the last planet that has a physical dimension in this solar system.
Yes. And that goes back to what I was saying before.
That having to have a physical
dimension. You have to have a physical platform to undo the karma that you made on a physical planet, on a physical platform in another planet.
Yes.
And that's just the way it is.
That's the way it is.
It's a cosmic law. There are cosmic laws that the Ascended Master has to go by, and they can't just make up something and say, well, in order to help this evolution, let's just do this. Because that's exactly what the Watchers did.
Yes, they did.
They did not get the orders from their correct hierarchs. Right, the hierarchs.
Yeah.
And they just said, well, let's go down there and fix things.
And change the race.
So they changed the race.
And you had the giants. So during the time of Enoch, there were giants, and even during the time of the Old Testament with Goliath, there were giants.
Right.
But you see the karmic board, we don't see 45, is it 45 feet?
Yeah, in the book of Enoch, it says that the giants were 30 cubits, and if you translate that to feet, it would be 45 feet.
Okay, so 45 feet beings during the time of Enoch, we're looking at 10,000 BC or beyond 10,000 BC. The judgment was enacted so that you do not see 45-foot giants running around the planet today. People might say, well, did God do anything about this?
Right.
Well, there were so many things that he did because, as you know, evil was once very physical. Even if you watch the movie Lord of the Rings, you see that there are these huge creatures running around, and evil was more physical and even worse than it is today. You had creatures like dinosaurs that were running around at the same time mankind was around. So the Brotherhood put a stop to this. You do not see these atrocities on the physical plane where they may exist on the astral plane. They don't exist in the physical. And when the judgment came down, in many epochs and episode, the crystal cord, would you mention that?
Yes.
The crystal cord, which was once like 9 feet in diameter,
right,
was reduced to a mere thread. Why? Because mankind had greater powers then, and they misused those powers tremendously. Black magicians could run around turning people into half man and half fish by black magic and so forth. They were very, very powerful. You don't see that now.
Right.
This is a judgment.
Right.
This is what the hierarchy has been doing for all of these generations and cutting them off to a certain extent, cutting the power off of the fallen ones, the fallen angels, so that they cannot do these atrocities that we sometimes see in movies. And again, repeating with Star Wars and other movies that have to do with battles of light and darkness and all monstrous creatures and so forth. Again, the writer or the one writing the screenplay is still tapping into the Akashic records.
Right. There's a race memory of it.
Race memory, a soul memory that they may have lived through it on this or another planet.
Right. And there's also the very famous edict that you can read in the Bible.
Yeah.
And people will recognize it when I say it, but it was actually an edict of Sanakamara to stop exactly what you were talking about at that time, and it's still used today. And that was the statement, to them that hath, more shall be added. To him that hath not, even that which he has shall be taken away. Now, the Ascended Masters have revealed that there's a few words missing out of that quote. And what it really should sound like is, to those that have the light, more shall be added. To those that do not have the light, and even the light which they have stolen, shall be taken away. And then it says, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, which means they're going to be angry because the light that they stole, the light that they used to have, was curtailed and in some instances completely cut off.
Yeah.
And they cannot do the things that they do. And just to follow up with what you were saying, there are some watchers around on the earth today, but they have nowhere near the power they did when they first descended. And obviously, like you said, when the watchers, they do intermarry, they didn't as much before because they knew that they were trying to keep their seed together. They no longer have giant physical forms.
No.
Their prodigy is no longer giant. They're like anyone else. So they have been depleted of their power, and it is time for them to go. So,
and that is ongoing. That brings us also, in terms of judgment, to the continent of Atlantis.
Right.
And we know that Atlantis existed going back, according to Theosophy, like several million years. And due to the misuses of the sacred fire, due to the misuse of technology and so forth, Atlantis broke up into many islands in the Atlantic Ocean. One was in the northern Atlantic, southern Atlantic, where the islands of Cuba, those islands down in the Caribbean, are actually remnants of part of the southern continent of Atlantis. 80,000 BC, 800,000, there was a breakup of the land. But then, finally, there was only one island left, Poseidonis. And it was during that period, the latter part of that history, now I'm going to 9,564 BC, is the date given to us, not only by the Ascended Masters, but in Theosophical literature, the Mahatma letters by Masters Moore and Kuthumi, that was the date of the last remnant of Poseidonis, Atlantis, sinking. So why did it sink?
Right.
Why did they have to actually sink? Well, this was the time of Noah. And Noah lived 900 years because his crystal cord was not down to a little thread. It was wider. He was a great man and a great devotee at this time. And he was told, of course, to build this ark that would save him. What happened on Atlantis was that the mad scientists, if you want to call them that, which were the embodied Luciferians, the embodied laggards, and the Nephilim, started to again experiment, and they merged the seed of animal and human beings. And the result was what you see in Greek mythology: centaurs, satyrs, half man, half animal, half horse, and so forth.
And again, they knew what they're doing because
they knew
they're
what they were doing.
encapsulating the light that was
Yeah.
in mankind, whatever
Yeah.
light there was. And once you encapsulate that with an animal, it now has to evolve through that form.
Yes.
And that is, it's not a divine matrix, it's not a divine
Yeah.
form, but now that being is trapped in that form. It has to evolve through it.
It has to evolve through it. And some of these creations had no soul, and other times, some of these creations that were half man, half animal were people that did have souls. And even in the Edgar Casey readings, we see that in the latter part of this period, people who had appendages and feathers and that were experimented on would go to the Temple of Healing on Atlantis, and they would be removed of these appendages which were animal-like. So
Right.
it's a very complicated history, but just to let
Yes.
everyone know that the reason for the sinking of this continent, and it was taken down in one tremendous swoop, one fell swoop.
Or what was left of the continent, because you're saying that when this was
one
happening,
island.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
the
island that was
island
left, right?
was it down. It was large though,
Yeah.
and it was pulled down to the very bottom, and probably underneath the ocean. And that is one of the most devastating periods. And of course, the flood occurred because of that action. The rains occurred, tidal waves occurred, and so this is actually part of history.
Right, but let's
Many people
clarify
think
that.
it's a legend.
Right, but let's clarify that the flood and the sinking did not affect the entire planet.
No,
We're talking about the sinking of Atlantis, flooding and cataclysmic
Mediterranean.
actions.
affected the Mediterranean.
Yeah, but it's affecting areas
Yeah,
where the Ascended Masters are not talking about an entire planet being inundated by waters
right. That is
10 or
correct.
20, 30 feet high
Yeah,
after
right.
40 days
It
of rain.
wasn't the whole planet.
It makes for a good movie, though, with everything in the ark floating
Oh
around
yeah.
and Ararat. But, you know,
Ararat. The ark did land on
Right.
Ararat. I mean, that's
you know, now the Nephilim were also around
yes.
at that time, and they also read the cycles of God, and they know that when they get really crazy like that there's going to be a recompense. There's going to be a cataclysmic event. So what the Nephilim do is when the earth starts to shake and the cataclysm and the breakup of that island starts, well, what do? They run to their spacecraft, go up, circle the earth for however long they need to, and wait for everything to subside, and they come back down. Now that may sound really crazy, but see, this is what happens. It is really actually dodging their karma. They get out of the situation, or they think they're dodging their karma.
Well, they think.
But they're relegated to the earth.
Yes.
They have to re-embody here. And so the last laugh is always with the karmic board, because you don't see them taking off in their spacecraft right now. You know, they haven't even shown themselves really, because they know that the Great White Brotherhood is here and is giving this teaching. So I think that's good for this
Amazing.
episode.
I think so.
And we'll conclude on that, and we'll pick up with a little bit more in the next episode. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.